She paid for his career. He used the money to marry her sister, and her own mother asked her to smile. Alina Voss sat in the last row, violet satin dress, ironed by her own hands. Nobody beside her. She watched the man she had quietly destroyed herself for slide a ring onto Avery's finger beneath a white floral arch. 5 years of her life. Gone. Not to failure. Not to tragedy. To betrayal. By the two people who were supposed to love her most. Was she really that invisible? Or had she made herself that way? One sacrifice at a time. The Pacific coast was stunning that afternoon. String lights swayed in the ocean breeze. Salty mist wrapped around white floral arches. Guests laughed, champagne flowed, and Margaret, silver-haired, glowing, 62 years of quiet favoritism dressed in cream, pressed a hand to her heart like this was the most beautiful day she had ever witnessed. It probably was. For her. For 5 years. Alina had been the invisible foundation of Ryan Caldwell's life. She paid his mortgage when commissions dried up, co-signed the BMW he drove to impress clients, covered his networking dinners, his conference fees, his carefully curated wardrobe, all on an ER nurse's salary. All while working 12-hour shifts at San Francisco General. All while believing the life they were building would one day include her. The moment Ryan earned his first $52,000 commission, he filed for divorce. 2 months later, he was kissing her sister, and Alina sat in the last row, clapping. That morning, Margaret had found her by the side entrance, smoothing her dress alone. She didn't ask how Alina was doing. She said, "You're the strong one. Avery needs protecting. Don't let this family fall apart in front of everyone." Alina had nodded. She always nodded. Now, as applause washed over her like a wave she couldn't stand in, she looked down at her own hands, the hands that had pressed against strangers' chests at 3 a.m., that had steadied IVs through 12-hour shifts, that had once held Ryan's face and whispered, "I believe in you." She thought quietly. To no one, I spent so long making myself useful that I forgot to make myself matter. One tear. Just one. She brushed it away before anyone could see. Nobody was looking anyway. What Alina didn't know, couldn't have known, was that 20 feet away, near the outdoor bar, a man in a black suit stood perfectly, unnervingly still. He hadn't been invited. He hadn't come for the vows, or the view, or the champagne. Sharp, steel-gray eyes. Calm. Ancient. Unblinking. Fixed entirely on her. Not on the radiant bride. Not on the glittering crowd. Only on the woman in the last row who was quietly trying not to fall apart. He had been watching her for exactly 11 minutes. As the crowd surged toward the newlyweds. As Margaret beamed and Avery laughed and Ryan raised his glass. As Alina rose from her chair, invisible as always, already drifting toward the exit. The man in the black suit reached into his jacket, closed his fingers around a small, matte black card. He didn't follow her. Not yet. He simply waited. With the patience of someone who had lived long enough to know that the right moment always arrives. She doesn't know, he thought, eyes never leaving her. She saved my life 2 years ago, and tonight, I will choose her again. But she had no idea that everything was about to change. If you were Alina, would you have stayed at that wedding? Or walked out the door the moment you arrived? One word, stay or leave. She almost made it to the parking lot. Heels on asphalt, violet dress catching the coastal wind. 3 steps from her car when a voice stopped her. Low, deliberate. The kind of quiet authority that didn't need to raise itself to be heard. Alina Voss. She turned. The man from the bar stood beneath the string lights at the venue's edge. Black suit. A small matte card held loosely between two fingers. Steel gray eyes that caught the last of the evening light and gave nothing back. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't performing. He simply stood there like the concept of waiting had been invented around him. 2 years ago, he said. San Francisco General. Chest wound. You were the only one in that room who refused to let me go. The memory arrived before she could stop it. The trauma bay had smelled of antiseptic and fluorescent urgency. The patient, admitted as John Doe, gunshot wound to the chest, had been ashen by the time they wheeled him in. No ID, no next of kin. Pulse barely registering. Dr. Morris had glanced once at the monitors, then at the clock. The expression of a man running arithmetic on a life. Not worth the resource expenditure. Call it. Alina had already had her gloves on. We're saving him, she said, not looking up. He has value. Morris left. The resident hesitated. Alina worked alone for 11 minutes. Compressions, epinephrine, a second defibrillation, until the monitor found its rhythm again. She remembered one other detail from that night when she'd cut away his shirt to place the leads. She'd seen it. Just at the collar. Just for a second. A tattoo unlike anything in her 12 years of ER work. Not a prison marking. Not military ink. Ancient lines in a script that looked like a language the modern world had collectively agreed to forget. She had told herself it meant nothing. She had been wrong. You brought me back twice, he said now, still not moving closer. You said I had value when every person in that room had already written me off. Alina's grip tightened around her car keys. I say that about every patient. I know. The faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the memory of one. That's exactly why I'm here. He extended the black card between two fingers, unhurried, certain, like someone offering a key to a door they already knew would eventually open. My name is Thorne Valeth. This isn't charity. It's a transaction. You saved my life. I'm returning it. Legal resources, financial counsel, a way out of the wreckage someone else built on your name. She didn't take the card. You don't know anything about my name. $120,000 in fraudulent debt. 3 credit accounts opened without your signature. A home equity loan tied to the condo you co-signed in 2021. He delivered it without cruelty. The way a physician delivers a diagnosis that is terrible, but no longer uncertain. Ryan Caldwell forged your identity to fund the career you were already paying for. You haven't checked your credit report yet, but you will. She checked it right there. Phone screen too bright in the coastal dark. He was exact, down to the dollar. I thought betrayal had a ceiling. She thought, staring at the numbers. I was wrong about that too. She didn't leave. She ended up at table 12, at the far edge of the reception where the string lights barely reached and the ocean was the loudest sound. She didn't know why she stayed. Only that her legs had stopped cooperating, and that for the first time in a long while, someone had handed her information instead of another obligation. Thorne appeared 20 minutes later. He didn't sit across from her. He sat beside her, one empty chair between them, and ordered 2 glasses of water from a passing server. The ease of someone who had attended gatherings like this for centuries and found them equally tiresome every time. You could have sent a lawyer, Alina said. An email. You didn't need to come here personally. No, he agreed. Then why? He considered the question with the weight it deserved. Because I watched you sit in the back row of your own humiliation and wipe away one tear before anyone could notice. And I thought, that woman has never once been seen by someone who wasn't planning to use it. She looked at him then. Really looked. past the composure, past the precision of his clothes and the stillness of his expression. There was nothing hungry in his face, nothing performing care to get something in return, just steadiness, old and absolute. Her armor shifted, not crumbled, shifted. Just enough. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Tonight? Nothing." He picked up his water glass. "You just found out the man you gave 5 years to stole your identity. That's already more than enough to carry." It was such a quiet mercy, the permission to carry only one thing at a time, that she almost didn't know how to receive it when Ryan crossed the room toward the bar, laughing too loudly. His gaze caught on Alina, and something shifted in his expression. Not nostalgia. Possession. Even now, even still, Thorn rose before Ryan could reach her. "Dance with me." Not a command, a door, offered open. She took it. On the dance floor, his hand rested at her waist, deliberate, unhurried, the touch of someone who understood the difference between holding and claiming. "You don't owe anyone your presence here," he said quietly. Beneath the jazz and the sound of the ocean, she didn't respond. But she didn't pull away. The whole wedding watched. Ryan's jaw locked. Avery's curated smile faltered. Margaret's eyes moved across the room with the narrowed calculation of a woman whose carefully managed narrative had just slipped. Alina noticed none of it. "I spent years making myself smaller so everyone else had room," she thought. I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply take up space. 40 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a 24-hour diner in the Tenderloin. Neon light bleeding orange through rain-streaked windows, burnt coffee and wet pavement. A city that never fully committed to sleeping. Thorn had spread the credit report flat on the table. He read it once. Then he looked up. "What do you want?" Not "what do you need?" Not "let me handle this." What she wanted. As though her answer were the only relevant data point. "I want him held accountable," she said. "I could arrange that before morning." His voice was entirely level. "But I won't. Not like that." She frowned. "If I fix this for you, you trade one dependency for another. Ryan used your need against you. I won't use your gratitude the same way." He leaned back, arms loosely folded. "You file the report, you hire the forensic accountant. I provide the tools, you do the work. The outcome belongs to you." Something shifted inside her. Not warmth yet, but the particular ache of being offered genuine respect for the first time, and having nowhere familiar to put it. "Who are you, actually?" she asked. The neon caught the edge of his collar. She glimpsed it again. The ancient tattoo. The same lines she had seen 2 years ago in the trauma bay. He didn't look away. "I'm the vampire king of the Valeth clan. My world carries real danger. People close to me become targets. I'm telling you before you decide anything, because you deserve choices made with full information." The coffee machine hissed. Rain tapped the glass. Alina sat with it. She thought about every choice she had made in the last 5 years without full information. Every time she had trusted in silence and been charged for it afterward. "Should I be afraid of you?" she asked. "Probably," he said honestly. "But not for the reasons you're thinking." Thorn's phone lit up on the table. He glanced at it, and something moved behind his eyes. Subtle, almost invisible. But Alina had spent 12 years reading faces in emergency rooms, and the compressed seconds when composure and reality diverge. She caught it. "What is it?" she asked. He turned the phone face down. "Nothing that needs to be yours tonight." But the stillness in him had changed quality. Older, more watchful, facing inward toward something she couldn't see. And then her own phone buzzed. Unknown number. 3 words. Hunters are coming. Just when she thought she could trust again, the past returned. Hunters are coming. 3 words. Unknown number. No punctuation, just the blunt gravity of a warning from someone who had her number and enough information to know she needed one. Across the diner table, Thorne had already seen it. He hadn't reached for her phone, hadn't moved at all. He looked at her with those gray eyes, the particular stillness of someone who has survived enough crises to know that the first 30 seconds are for assessment, not reaction. Someone inside my clan sent that. A warning. Or a provocation. I don't know which yet. But it means you've already been identified. Identified as what? As someone who matters to me. He said it without softness, without sentiment, as a fact he was presenting for her consideration. In my world, that carries consequences. Alina set the phone down. She thought about the last 5 years. Every consequence she had absorbed that belonged to someone else's choices. The mortgage, the forged signatures, the wedding, the last row. Being near someone always cost me something, she thought. At least this time I'm being told in advance. He paid the check. Not to take control, to close one thing so she could think clearly about the next. She noticed the difference. She didn't leave 3 days after the wedding. Alina sat across a laminate desk from Linda Okafor, forensic accountant, financial district, second floor of a building that smelled of printer ink and institutional carpet. Linda had the credit report, the bank records Thorne's legal contact had surfaced, and a yellow legal pad dense with her own handwriting. She read without reacting. She had seen versions of this before. Signature forgeries on 4 documents. The home equity loan is the most serious. That's felony-level fraud. The 2 credit accounts and the vehicle loan constitute identity theft. Combined with the forgery trail, you're looking at 18 months minimum if the district attorney pursues it aggressively. Alina's hands were folded in her lap. Still. The trained stillness of someone who had learned that composure and calm are not the same thing, and that only one of them is useful under pressure. File it, she said. Your name enters public record alongside his. Your prior relationship will be documented. I know. Linda nodded, picked up her pen. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Her apartment in the outer Sunset, 2nd floor. Foghorns when the wind was right. She was sitting on the floor of her bedroom, not from grief, from the specific fatigue of someone who had been load-bearing for other people's lives for so long that her body occasionally forgot how to simply rest inside its own. Her phone had buzzed 14 times in 2 hours. Call me. People are talking. Are you trying to destroy my marriage before it even starts? Again. This is not what strong women do. From a number she hadn't blocked yet. You will regret this. She read each message once, the way you read a bill, fully, without flinching, so you understand exactly what you owe and to whom. Then she blocked them. All of them. The family group chat, named Harrington Girls, a title that had never quite included her. She left without a parting word. The phone went silent. The fog pressed against her window. I spent 34 years being the person this family leaned on, she thought. That ends here. Not with anger, just with a decision. A single message came through after the silence settled. Thorne, call if you need anything. No pressure. 7 words. No follow-up. No second message asking if she'd seen it. Just an open door, and the respect to let her decide. She set the phone face down and sat in the quiet for a long time. Later that night, she moved through her rooms the way you only move when no one is watching. She made tea she didn't drink. She folded a dish towel and set it down. She opened the refrigerator, found nothing she wanted. Closed it again. On the shelf above her bed sat a photograph. Her and Avery, 15 years ago. Alina at 19, already in scrubs. Avery at 13, pressed against her side, grinning with the complete ease of someone who had never been designated the strong one, because someone else had already taken the role. Alina had been proud of that. Once. She had believed that being needed was the same as being loved. She took the photograph down, didn't throw it away, just placed it face down in the drawer and pushed it closed. I gave them everything I had, she thought quietly. They built their happiness on it and never once looked down. The trial moved with the cold efficiency of well-documented evidence. Handwriting analysis, bank records, a forensic timeline showing, with the precision of numbers that don't negotiate, exactly when and how Ryan Caldwell had financed his career on Alina's stolen identity. The courtroom was small, fluorescent, smelled of institutional coffee. Alina sat in the gallery, not at the witness stand, not in the victim's chair, just a wooden seat 3 rows back, watching the judge read aloud. Identity theft, financial fraud, forgery of legal documents, 18 months in federal custody. Ryan's attorney filed for appeal immediately. 3 months of freedom while it processed. Ryan turned in his seat. The instinct of a man who had spent years looking for her face when he needed something. He found her eyes across the room. She held his gaze. Not with anger, not with triumph. Just the clear, level look of someone who had permanently stopped organizing her self-worth around his opinion of her. He was the one who looked away. Outside the courthouse, Avery was waiting, mascara precise, composure already reassembling itself. I didn't know about the accounts, she said. I swear I didn't. Alina stopped walking, didn't turn around. It doesn't matter whether you knew, Avery. You made your choices. The wedding, the silence. Every time you let Mom call me the strong one because it was easier for you if I was. Those choices belong to you now. Live with them. She kept walking, down the courthouse steps, into the San Francisco fog. Alone. And for the first time in years, not made smaller by it. She had reached the bottom step when her phone rang. Unknown number. 2 seconds of silence, then a voice, low and deliberately distorted. The Blackthorn clan knows Thorn Valith has chosen a human. Leave the city, or become the weapon they use against him. The call ended. A streetcar bell rang once, somewhere in the fog, and went quiet. Alina stood still. She thought about every person who had framed her existence as a resource. Something to draw from, to use up, to leave when the account ran dry. She thought about what it meant that someone dangerous, someone ancient, someone who had survived 400 years of enemies, had looked at her and chosen her. Not to use her, to stand beside her. And in that moment, the truth arrived fully, without ceremony. She wasn't afraid of the Blackthorn clan. She was afraid of losing the first person who had ever called her destruction by its right name. Not weakness, not failure, but the evidence of someone who had been carrying far more than their share. She called him. He picked up on the first ring. I know, he said, before she could speak. His voice was different, the careful surface stripped away, something older and more alert underneath. Don't go home. I'm sending someone to. A sound in the background. Sharp. Final. The unmistakable register of violence. Then silence. Thorn. Nothing. Thorn. The line went dead. The line was dead. Alina stood on the courthouse steps for 4 seconds. The same 4 seconds she used in the ER between the moment a monitor flatlined and the moment her hands moved. The gap between shock and decision. The space where some people froze. She didn't freeze. She pulled up the last address Thorne's contact had sent 3 days ago. A building in Soma. Ground floor registered as a private events company. Everything above it belonging to the Valeth clan in ways that didn't appear on any public document. She hailed a cab and got in. "You've brought people back from worse," she told herself, hands pressed flat on her thighs. "You've done it in worse rooms with less time." But even as she thought it, a quieter voice answered underneath. "Before. They were strangers. Now he isn't. That changes the cost." She never reached Soma. A black SUV cut her cab off at 6th and Folsom. 2 men. Efficient in the way that leaves no room for negotiation. She woke in a warehouse. Concrete floor. Somewhere in the dark. Water dripped in a slow, metronomic rhythm. The air carried rust and salt, and the particular cold of a space that had been abandoned long enough to develop its own climate. A single floodlight buzzed overhead like something that had outlasted its usefulness. Her wrists were secured to a metal chair. Ryan Caldwell stood 10 feet away. He looked stripped. Not of his appearance, but of the performance that had always animated it. The charm, the ease, the practiced confidence of a man who had moved through the world on borrowed credibility. What remained was something harder, smaller. "You actually believe he chose you," he said. "That's almost impressive." Alina looked at him the same way she had looked at him across the courtroom. Level, unapologetic. "You're working with hunters," she said. Not a question. "They needed leverage. I needed out." He shrugged. The old gesture, designed to make cruelty look like practicality. "You were always the most useful thing about our marriage. Turns out that's still true." She used to flinch at things like that, she thought. She used to absorb them and adjust. She looked at the zip ties on her wrists, at the floodlight, at the distance between herself and the door. "Ryan, you know what I did for 12 years. He frowned slightly. "I have stabilized people in rooms with less than this. I always find a way through." The warehouse doors didn't open. They gave way. Thorne came through with the focused inevitability of something that had decided, long ago, that obstacles were simply problems to move past. His black suit was torn at the shoulder, blood at his collar, his own. From a wound at his left side he was refusing to acknowledge in any useful way. 4 hunters. Shattered neon. The crack of a silver-tipped weapon against the concrete floor. Alina cataloged everything. The way he favored his left. The slight drag in his right step. The quality of the wound. The same focused assessment she brought to every crisis, rendered automatic by a decade of practice. He reached her, cut the zip ties in one motion. "Are you hurt?" "No, you are. Left side." "How deep?" He looked at her for half a second. Something almost like surprise, that her first instinct was clinical rather than grateful. "Deep enough," he said. The last hunter moved from behind. Thorne caught the hunter's wrist. But not cleanly. The silver stake scraped the existing wound wide. He went to one knee. 4 centuries of composure, and his body finally refused to be managed. "Ryan." From across the warehouse. Even kings run out of time. Alina was already moving. Not toward the exit. Toward Thorne. She pressed both palms against his side. 12 years of muscle memory. The same hands that had worked through countless trauma bays. That had believed in people others had already written off. The same hands. This time, something entirely different happened. Heat. Not pain, but ignition. The way a filament finds current after years of sitting cold and dark. It began at her palms and moved up through her arms. And for 3 full seconds, she lost the boundary between where her body ended and his began. The wound closed. Not gradually. The way a held breath releases. Complete, Instantaneous. Inevitable. Thorne's eyes opened. He stared at her palms, then at her face. "Your blood," he said quietly. "Alina, it heals in ways that go beyond medicine." She withdrew her hands slowly. They were still warm, faintly luminous in the dark, the light already fading back to ordinary. "What does that mean?" "It means you carry blood healer lineage, the rarest thing in my world, something hunters have searched for 200 years. Ryan's voice cut across the warehouse, sharp with sudden calculation. "That's why Blackthorn wanted her. Not because of you, because of what she is." Thorne rose to his feet when he spoke. His voice held the same deep, deliberate register, but the careful surface had been replaced by something more exposed, honest in a way he rarely permitted himself. "2 years ago in that trauma bay, you fought for me when the room had already decided otherwise. Tonight you did it again, for my entire clan, not because of what runs in your blood." He held her gaze. "Because of who you are." Ryan laughed, hollow, diminishing. "She's a biological resource, a healer with a nursing degree. No." Thorne's voice dropped to something very quiet and very final. "She chose me when the world said I wasn't worth choosing. That is not a resource. That is a person. And I choose her." Police arrived within minutes. Through Thorne's legal network, the same infrastructure that had produced Linda Okafor's introduction and surfaced Ryan's forged documents. Ryan was taken from the warehouse door, still wearing the expression of a man who had not fully absorbed that the story had stopped centering him. In the days that followed, Thorne released documentation he had held for months, financial records and communications between Margaret Harrington and a hunter network spanning 11 years. Margaret had fed information about Alina's schedule and hospital access to people running operations that required proximity to medical facilities. She had not fully known what Alina was, but she had known her daughter was different. She had feared it, and fear, in Margaret's case, had expressed itself as quiet cooperation with people she should never have trusted. Avery called from a number Alina hadn't blocked yet. "Mom says she was trying to protect us. She says she didn't understand what they would do with the information." "I know what she says," Alina replied. "I've been listening to what she says my entire life." A pause. "Are you okay?" Avery asked, smaller than usual, genuinely uncertain. "I'm going to be," Alina said, "but not while I'm still inside this." She ended the call. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, foghorns off the bay, the neighbor's television through the wall, and looked at her hands. Still warm. The heat she was slowly learning to recognize as her own. As something that had always been there. Working quietly in fluorescent-lit rooms while the people closest to her took everything else within reach. "I used to heal people to earn my place," she thought. "I know now that I never needed to earn it." The photograph was still face down in the drawer. She didn't need to take it out. For the first time in decades, she knew exactly what she had to do. Not to be useful, not to be strong enough for everyone else. To choose, finally and completely, herself. 3 months after the trial, Ryan Caldwell began serving his sentence. The Presidio Heights project, the one he had pitched at the wedding reception, funded partly on Alina's stolen credit, collapsed without ceremony. The listing was pulled. The investors dispersed. The story disappeared from the financial press the way small disasters do. Absorbed into the ordinary noise of a city that always has something larger in motion. Alina didn't follow it. She had other things to tend to. Her credit score climbed the way healing does. Not in a straight line, not dramatically, but in increments that felt insignificant until suddenly they didn't. 520 to 611. Then 648. Then 695. She opened her first personal savings account on a Thursday afternoon. At a credit union 2 blocks from the hospital, in a 10-minute window between shift handoff and a staff meeting. The teller asked if she wanted to add a beneficiary. "I'll come back for that," she said. She wasn't ready to plan that far forward yet. But she was ready to begin. The promotion to nurse manager came the following month, a confirmation more than a surprise, since she had been doing the work for 2 years under a title that hadn't reflected it. Her name appeared on a small placard beside a door that was now, officially, hers. She stood outside it for a moment on the first morning, read her own name, thought about the woman who had sat in the last row of a wedding 8 months ago, invisible to everyone in the room, clapping for a life that had been quietly dismantled around her. Different chapter, she thought. Same person. Finally written correctly. She drove to her mother's house on a Sunday in late November. The neighborhood smelled the same. Morning fog, eucalyptus, and something sweet baking somewhere down the block. The front garden was tidy. The welcome mat had been replaced, but the wind chime beside the door was the same one that had hung there since Alina was 7 years old. She had bought it, a Mother's Day gift. She had never heard Margaret acknowledge it. Margaret opened the door before she could knock. She looked older, not broken. She had too much architecture for that, but genuinely reduced. The way people look when the story they have been telling about themselves meets evidence it cannot outlast. She began crying almost immediately. I told myself it was protection. The hunters. I thought if I cooperated, they would leave us alone. I thought Avery was the one at risk because she seemed fragile. I thought you could withstand— You thought I was the strong one, Alina said. So the cost didn't register. Margaret's hands came up, the reaching gesture of a mother who wanted to close the distance and no longer trusted herself to. Alina didn't step back, but she didn't close the distance either. She stood in the doorway of the house she had grown up in, beside a wind chime no one had ever thanked her for, and said what she had needed to say for 34 years. I needed you to see me, not the one who could carry it, not the one who didn't require tending. Just me, the same as Avery, the same as anyone. The chime moved softly in the fog. Margaret exhaled, a long, tired sound carrying decades of unexamined choices. I know, she said. I'm sorry. It wasn't restitution. It wouldn't undo the forged documents, or the 11 years of compromised information, or the photograph still face down in a drawer. But it was real. And Alina had recently learned to hold real things carefully, neither discarding them nor pressing them flat. I'm not coming back, she said. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I'm not disappearing either. That's not the same thing. She drove home with the window cracked, the morning fog burning slowly off the city, the bay emerging piece by piece through the gray. She felt the way a room feels after a long winter finally relents. Not warm yet, but honest, open, ready. 2 weeks later, a patient arrived at San Francisco General at 11:47 p.m. Trauma Bay 3, unidentified, gunshot wound to the chest. The attending on call assessed the vitals, the resource board, the odds, and began the familiar calculation. Prognosis is poor. What's our capacity situation? Alina, already gloved, already in motion, said, We work the case. He deserves the same effort as anyone else. She didn't look up. The resident beside her caught something as Alina cut away the patient's shirt to place the leads. A marking at the collar. Ancient, intricate. A design in a script with no living translation. Not Thorne's clan, a different lineage entirely. Alina registered it, filed it, kept working. Later. When the bay had quieted and the patient was stable, and the only sound was the fluorescent hum, she stood at the scrub sink and let the water run over her hands. Still warm. The low, steady heat she was gradually learning to recognize as her own, rather than a mystery to manage. I used to pour myself into this work to justify being here, she thought. Now I do it because I know I belong here. That's a different kind of strength entirely. She dried her hands, turned off the light, walked toward the next hour. He was leaning against a concrete pillar when she came down. Unhurried, composed, present in the particular way he always was. Black suit, gray eyes. The faint warmth of someone who had been running slightly colder than human for 400 years, and was, lately, learning a different temperature. He didn't speak first. He let the question form in the space between them, the way it always had. Do you want me to leave? The same question he had asked in the Tenderloin Diner. The same open door. No obligation attached. No expectation embedded. Just a genuine offer of exit. Held without condition. Alina looked at him. She thought about the last row of a wedding. About a photograph placed face down in a drawer. Not in anger, but in completion. About a trauma bay 2 years ago. And a woman who had pressed her hands against a stranger's chest and refused to accept the room's verdict. She thought about who she had been then, and who she was now. The same person, she realized. Finally, with room enough to be herself, she crossed the distance between them and took his hand. Not because she needed rescue, not because the alternative was lonelier, but because she had calculated the full cost, with full information, and she was choosing it freely. No, she said. We stay. Together. His fingers closed around hers. Steady. Unhurried. The grip of someone who had learned. Over 400 years. The precise difference between holding someone and holding them back. The fog pressed at the garage entrance. The city above them went on being itself. Layered. Difficult. Luminous. Full of people who needed saving and deserved to be seen while it happened. Driving home with the window down, the city unfolding around them. She thought, the apartment is going to feel different tonight. Not because anything in it has changed. Because I have 3 months after the underground garage. Alina's apartment was still the same apartment. 2nd floor, outer Sunset. The neighbor's television through the wall. Foghorns when the wind came in off the bay. But the shelf above her bed now held 3 succulents instead of 1. A jade plant. And something with fat purple leaves whose name she had looked up and half remembered. The dish towel on the counter was a color she had chosen because she liked it. The refrigerator held food she had bought deliberately, not out of exhaustion or the residual habit of stocking a kitchen for someone who was no longer there. Small things. Each one a choice she had made for herself, and no one else. She had started sleeping with the window open. She hadn't done that in 6 years. Ryan had always said the street noise was disruptive. She had adjusted. She had adjusted so many times, for so many years, that she had nearly lost track of her own preferences entirely. The fog came in at night now. She let it. On a Sunday in late winter. They sat on the balcony of Thorne's Pacific Heights penthouse as the evening fog rolled in across the bay. The Golden Gate was barely visible, just the suggestion of something enormous and enduring. The way certain truths announce themselves before you have words for them. Alina had brought coffee in a thermos, the kind from the diner 2 blocks from the hospital. Poured into a cup at the start of a shift she no longer dreaded. She poured 2 and set 1 in front of Thorne without ceremony. He looked at it. I haven't had coffee in a very long time, he said. You don't have to. No. He picked it up and held it. letting the warmth move through the ceramic and into his hands, the way warmth had been slowly finding its way back into him, in increments. In ordinary Sundays, he didn't drink it, but he held it for the rest of the evening. "There are things in my past," he said after a while, "that I can't revise. My world will not become safe because I want it to be." "I know that," she said. "You could have a quieter life." "Thorn," she said it gently, the way you say a name to stop someone from finishing a speech they've rehearsed instead of felt. "I spent 5 years living a quiet life that was being dismantled behind my back. Quiet isn't the same as safe. I know the difference now." He was still. "I stayed with Ryan because leaving felt like failure. I'm staying with you because I've thought it through, and I'm not afraid of what I decided." The fog pressed in across the city lights. Down on the street, someone walked a dog. The small sound of tags against a collar drifting upward in the dark. Ordinary and grounding. "I used to stay because I was afraid to leave," she thought. "Now I stay because I genuinely want to be here." That is not a small distinction. That is everything. 2 weeks later, a newly licensed nurse named Priya started on Alina's floor. 23 years old, technically precise, and terrified in the specific way that only arrives when you first understand that the work is not a simulation, that the person in front of you is real, that what you do next will matter, and that no training fully prepares you for the weight of that knowledge landing all at once. On her third shift, Priya froze in a trauma bay, not from lack of skill, from the sudden, full comprehension of what she was doing. The gap between knowing a procedure and understanding that a person's life was inside it. Alina stepped in beside her, didn't take over, didn't redirect, just stood close enough that her steadiness became available. The way a tuning fork sounds a note that nearby strings quietly find. "He deserves the same effort as anyone else," Alina said to the room, calmly, as though it were simply true, which it was. Priya found her footing, kept going. Afterward, at the scrub sink, Priya asked, "How do you stay that grounded?" Alina considered it honestly. "For a long time I stayed calm, so other people wouldn't have to be." That looked like groundedness from the outside, but it wasn't. It was suppression. What you're seeing now is different. Now I'm actually okay. It looks similar. The inside of it is completely different. Priya nodded, the way young people nod when they receive something they'll understand more fully in another decade. That was fine. Alina had learned that some things get planted and found later. On a quiet Tuesday evening, she was sitting on the floor of her bedroom, not from grief, just from preference now. Her back against the bed, a book open beside her. The purple-leafed succulent at eye level. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She read it without flinching. The Blackthorn clan knows the blood healer is alive. They are not the only ones who are looking. She sat with it for a moment. Let it be what it was. Not a catastrophe. Not an undoing. Just the next thing that required a clear head and a choice. She called Thorn. He picked up on the first ring. "I saw it," he said. "What do we do?" A pause. Not hesitation, but the weight of someone choosing words that will mean something. "We face it the way we've faced everything else," he said. "Together, with full information." She looked at her hands. Warm. Steady. Entirely her own. "Okay," she said. She didn't close the window. And she finally understood what she had been carrying all along. Not damage. Not the debt of being the capable one. The reliable one. The one who held the center while everyone else was permitted to be uncertain. She had been carrying something real. something that had worked quietly in fluorescent lit rooms for 12 years, pressing against strangers' chests, holding IVs steady, refusing the room's verdict on who deserved to be saved. She had always known how to heal people. She had simply never been told that she was allowed to be one of them. The fog moved in across the bay. The city went on. The succulents on the shelf would need water in 3 days. And she would remember, because she was learning to tend the small things without being asked, without it costing her something she couldn't afford. Darkness, she thought, is not where you go to escape. It's where you finally stop pretending and learn to live as yourself. If you have spent your life being the one everyone leaned on, the daughter who managed, the wife who held things together, the grandmother who never said, "I'm tired," this story knows you. Choosing yourself is not abandonment. It is long overdue maintenance on a person who has been running on empty for other people's sake. Here is something small and real to try. This week, before you make anyone else's coffee, make your own. Pour it into the mug you like, not the practical one, the one you actually like. Sit at your kitchen table for 10 minutes with no phone, no list, no task waiting. If the silence feels strange, let it. You have earned 10 minutes of strange silence. That is not a small thing. For a woman who has spent decades last in line for her own attention. That is the whole lesson. Alina spent 34 years pouring herself into people who never once asked if she had anything left. If this story reached something in you, leave one word below that describes how it made you feel. Just one word. I will read every single one. This vampire tale was born from a real human soul, full of emotion, contradiction, and longing. AI was merely a companion who helped arrange the words to be as beautiful and clear as possible. That's why you'll find it not only terrifying, but also very human.